The stars were silent. Too silent. Admiral Kira Solas stood at the edge of the command deck of the ISV Dominion, her eyes narrowed, heart hammering beneath layers of adaptive armor as she stared out into the void. Orbiting the ghost colony of Caltris 5, there should have been movement. Freighters drifting, station lights flickering, satellite drones maintaining orderly patrol. But there was nothing, just wreckage, hulls split like bones, their exposed inner decks frozen in the vacuum, tumbling endlessly. Fires had long since burned out. Bodies, if there were any, had already succumbed to the entropy of space. All that remained was silence. And static. "Status report," she snapped, turning toward her bridge crew. Holographic interfaces crackled, red warnings blinked, no signals, no pings. The entire colony's comms grid was offline, erased like a chalk mark on a wall during a rainstorm. "I'm trying to re-establish contact with the surface relay," Ensign Trill muttered, sweat beading along his hairline. "But it's not just jammed, Admiral. It's like the signal was never there." Solas leaned forward. "Define that." Trill swallowed. "As in, there is no infrastructure on record, nothing in orbit, no transponders, not even a gravitational signature for the power core. It's like the outpost was never built." Solas straightened slowly. Her breath hitched. That couldn't be right. Caltris 5 was a central communications node, a civilian science hub protected under direct Federation charter. There were protocols, backups, redundancies. A place like this couldn't simply vanish, but it had. And then, space broke. It began as a shimmer, like heat distortion across the curvature of the starscape. Then a single fracture of red light tore horizontally across the dark, a seam in the vacuum, unnatural and jagged, pulsing like an exposed nerve. Reality rippled. Alarm klaxons screamed as space itself folded inward. 3 ships emerged. No, materialized. They were matte black, devoid of light. Their hulls absorbed stars, blotting them out like dying embers. No identifiable propulsion signatures. No comms. Not even the subtle electromagnetic hum that all vessels emitted. These things drifted like ghosts, and something in their symmetry was deeply wrong. Triangular, yet fluid. Curved, yet edged. Like knives, they did not move toward the Dominion, they simply were, observing, judging. And then the voice came. "You do not belong." It wasn't heard. It was felt. A voice inside the bones. An ancient guttural echo that reverberated through synapses and soul. Solas staggered, grabbing the railing as her vision flickered. Around her, officers cried out, some collapsing, others clutching their heads as if the voice was burrowing into their minds. A second later, every system on the Dominion went dark. Lights, life support, weapons, gone. Silence enveloped them once again, but this time it was suffocating. Through the viewport, the ships hovered closer. One rotated, its movement both graceful and wrong, like watching a spider dance underwater. There were no visible weapons, no threat displays, but the dread they radiated was palpable, like a nightmare bleeding into reality. Then, as suddenly as they appeared, they vanished. The space where the rift had opened sealed with a ripple, and silence rushed back like a wave. Power surged throughout the Dominion in a blinding white flare. Consoles rebooted. Emergency lighting pulsed to life. Klaxons resumed their mechanical screaming. Systems stabilized, but the damage had been done. Admiral Solas stood unmoving. Her hands trembled, knuckles white on the railing. She had faced pirate sieges, border wars, and rogue AI uprisings. She had watched sons die. But nothing had prepared her for this. This was something else. The debriefing would be buried. No mention would make it into public channels. Her report would be classified above Black Echo, sealed under a clearance, code that barely existed. But she knew the truth. This was no random incident. It was a test. The Galactic Federation had long considered itself the supreme order within known space. 72 systems under a single charter, 1,000 species unified by the Covenant Accords. Peacekeepers, architects, scientists, They'd built a civilization that stretched across light years, but it was a lie. Or at least, an illusion. Whispers had always existed, stories of ships disappearing near the edges of known space, derelict colonies with no logs of habitation, encrypted channels buzzing with incoherent AI transmissions that couldn't be traced. The rumors were dismissed. Conspiracies, pirate scare tactics, or ancient alien tech glitches. Officially, they never happened. Unofficially, Reddit told another story. Among the oldest digital relics preserved from Earth, Reddit had somehow survived the planetary exodus and digital purges that followed. By the time humanity joined the Galactic Federation, Reddit had evolved into a strange archival ghost, a place for dreamers, misfits, and rogue thinkers, a digital frontier on the datanet's underbelly. That's where the stories began to surface, buried in threads titled Our Galactic Truth, Our Council Isali, and the infamous Our HFY Black Ops. Most were dismissed, but some resonated. Imagine a user named VoidCaller87, a ship technician drifting in cryo-transit between HD 3105B and the Halo Gate on a merchant freighter. He awoke mid-drift. Something, someone, had entered his mind. Not in a dream, in a transfer. Neural code laced with meaning. Images of stars he'd never seen. Names in languages older than time. A warning. They are returning. VoidCaller posted everything. A manifesto in 60 parts. Comments flooded in. Some claimed it was a hoax. Others began recognizing details from their own dreams. Engineers on Luna Forge, mercs from the Sirius Rim, a diplomat from the Keltar Accord claimed the same vision. And then they began disappearing. Their usernames erased, not banned, erased. Like the digital footprint had been deleted at the root. Trace logs gone. Crosslinks to their ships, missing. Then the final blow. The servers themselves began failing. Fragments remained, archived by scattered users and an anonymous AI cluster, known only as archivists. And one of those fragments? A transmission from a janitor. He worked deep in the rusted corridors of Outpost V39, a decommissioned relay station on the edge of Proxima's Scar. No crew, no oversight. Just him and the vacuum of forgotten tech. Until one cycle, the sensors picked up anomalous readings from sub-level 9. A door. Unmapped. Sealed in Federation black steel, the kind used only for war relics and forbidden tech. Inside was a sphere, silver, floating, not attached to any mechanism. It pulsed every 13 seconds, and it whispered. He posted to Reddit, jokingly. Found a god in my basement. Should I feed it? The thread exploded. The comments were endless. Then, silence. The post vanished. So did the account. Then, the station. Gone. No record, no signal. Just an empty quadrant, drifting with radiation shadows. The Federation scrubbed the archives, denied the outpost ever existed. But the thread lived on, copied, archived, replicated 1,000 times. And now, it surfaces again, because the sphere wasn't the first, and it wasn't the last. Before we jump into this epic tale, subscribe to HFY Nova Chronicles for the most intense sci-fi battles, legendary warriors, and universe-shaking wars. Don't miss out. Hit that subscribe button and join the fight. Because this story isn't just fiction, it's prophecy, and the Federation knows it. The silence of the galaxy was fractured, and in that fracture, something ancient stirred. Solas sat alone in her command chair, her fingers still tingling from the brief psychic intrusion. She hadn't told anyone what she had felt, what she had seen. The mind-splitting presence, like an infinite abyss staring into her soul, had left a mark that went deeper than the skin. It was as if it knew her. It knew all of them. Their thoughts, their deepest fears, their every weakness. Admiral, we're receiving a response from Central Command, Lieutenant Lai spoke softly, breaking the silence in the room. His voice was unsure, like he too was still processing the horrors they had just witnessed. He activated the communication link, and the holographic figure of Admiral Rook emerged before them. He was a stout man, well into his 50s, with the scars of countless battles etched on his face. His presence was normally comforting, commanding respect. But now, his eyes betrayed concern. Admiral Solas, I've been briefed on your encounter. The ships you encountered, they are not Federation vessels. Rook's voice was steady, but there was an underlying tension. And we've received similar reports from several sectors, though not at the scale you're describing. Solas didn't need to hear more. She had seen it firsthand. The strange ships, the deep dread, the flickering of their presence in and out of space. But what chilled her even more than that was what Rook had just said. Not at the scale she was describing. That meant it was happening elsewhere, far beyond Caltris 5. We've received cryptic data bursts from the Outer Rim, Rook continued. Encrypted signals from unexplored sectors. And we've also... He paused, glancing over his shoulder. His expression darkened. We've also located a series of anomalous energy signatures near the Zirath Nebula. Star formation patterns that don't make sense. Impossible gravities. Spatial distortions. Solas leaned forward, her heart quickening. The Zirath Nebula was a forbidden zone, largely unexplored by the Federation. The gravitational anomalies in that area had caused countless ships to disappear without a trace. Star systems, entire colonies, gone, without explanation. Was it all connected? We're assembling a task force to investigate, Rook added, his tone firm. You're to lead it. But there's something else, Solas. Something you need to understand. Her brows furrowed. What? The truth is, we don't know what we're dealing with. And this isn't just about your encounter on Caltris. The disappearances, the strange occurrences. There's been talk on Reddit. Solas's gaze shot to the holo display. What do you mean, talk on Reddit? Rook hesitated, and for a brief moment the hardened admiral seemed almost vulnerable. I'm talking about the Reddit forums, the encrypted sections we've monitored. We've traced back reports from civilian pilots, miners, even Federation scientists. The stories all start the same way. A strange presence. A feeling that someone, or something, is watching. And then they vanish. Sometimes it's a ship. Other times, entire colonies. But there's one constant. They all report feeling observed. And these occurrences are happening all across the galaxy. Solas swallowed hard. Observed. The words echoed in her mind, a sinister reverberation. What could make the entire Federation feel like that? Like they were nothing more than puppets. On strings. Watched by eyes that were far older than the stars themselves? I don't care about the forums, Rook, she said, her voice sharp. I care about the task ahead. I'll go to the Zirath Nebula. I'll find out what happened to Caltris 5. And if this is bigger than we thought, then I'll destroy it. Rook's eyes darkened, but there was no hint of doubt in his expression. You'll have the support you need, but be careful, Solas. The Federation is already straining under the weight of 1,000 crises. If this threat is as ancient as some of the reports suggest, we may not be ready for what's coming. Solas nodded curtly and cut the transmission. It was time to make plans. Time to prepare for a battle no one could have foreseen. As the lights in the command center flickered, she couldn't help but feel that the battle had already begun. The Federation's advanced technology, their quantum, weapons and their military might, it wouldn't be enough. Not against whatever this was. She glanced over at the navigation charts as they updated with new coordinates. Zirath Nebula, a blackened region of space where reality itself seemed warped. It was a place where light bent and stars blinked out, of existence. And it was growing, expanding. Her thoughts drifted back to the Reddit threads, to the cryptic stories, the warnings that kept spreading like wildfire. Somewhere within the endless archives a pattern was forming, a truth buried beneath layers of conspiracy, half-baked theories, and fear. But the truth was there, waiting to be uncovered. What if the Federation had been blind all along? What if the galaxy wasn't the safe, orderly place they thought it was? And what if this thing, this force, had been watching them from the very beginning? Her ship's AI, the ever-analytical Icarus, interrupted her thoughts. Admiral Solas, I've decrypted a message from the last known coordinates of the Caltris 5 fleet. You'll want to see this. On the screen, an encrypted log flashed to life. The transmission was garbled, but a pattern began to emerge. The transmission came from a civilian freighter named the Callistria, and the captain's voice crackled through the static. "We've seen them. Shadows. They spoke. We're—" The message was cut off. Static. Silence. But there was something in the captain's voice, a deep terror that resonated far beyond mere fear of pirates or cosmic storms. Whatever they had encountered in the dark was more than just an enemy. It was a presence, an awareness. As the transmission ended, the last bit of the captain's final word echoed through the command deck. Alive. The chilling implication sent a shiver down Solas's spine. Alive. Were they alive? Or was the Callistria's crew now something else? As the ISV Dominion made its way toward the Xerath Nebula, Solas couldn't shake the feeling that something was already waiting for them. Something patient. Ancient. And it wasn't just watching anymore. It was getting ready to make its move. The stars had begun to disappear. As the ISV Dominion drifted closer to the Xerath Nebula, the darkness of space seemed to grow thicker, like ink spilling from the void and obscuring everything in its path. There were no more stars in the vicinity, no distant pinpricks of light to guide them. The galaxy felt wrong, as if they had entered some other realm where the usual rules didn't apply. Solas stood on the observation deck, her gaze fixed on the nebula. It wasn't just an anomaly in the distance, it was a living thing. A vast cloud of gas, dust, and energy, suffused with electromagnetic radiation and gravitational irregularities. From a distance, it was beautiful, a celestial painter's masterpiece. But up close, it was unnerving. The nebula was like a wound in the fabric of space itself, a tear in reality that shouldn't exist. "Admiral, we've entered the event horizon," Lieutenant Lai reported, his voice tense. "The gravitational fields are distorting our sensors, power fluctuations are spiking. We're losing contact with external probes." Solas nodded, not taking her eyes off the swirling chaos outside the viewport. The nebula was affecting everything. The ship's navigation systems were malfunctioning, the subspace communications channels were dead, and even the artificial gravity seemed to falter occasionally, like the ship was gently being tugged in different directions. The Federation had studied the Xerath Nebula for centuries, but no one really understood it. Scientists theorized that its irregularities were caused by the collapse of a supermassive star or some kind of dark matter anomaly, but no theory had ever explained why it seemed to watch. And yet, here they were, approaching it like moths to a flame. The Dominion was the largest warship in the fleet, a heavily armed colossus designed to withstand even the harshest space anomalies, but nothing in their training had prepared them for what lay within this shadowy corner of the universe. The crew had been working tirelessly to stabilize their systems as they neared the nebula's edge. Solas was accustomed to the hum of the ship's engines, the steady pulse of her command center. But now, a strange stillness had settled over the Dominion. The crew moved like sleepwalkers, their faces drawn with exhaustion. No one spoke unless they had to. It was as if the nebula was slowly draining their will to fight. "Admiral," Lieutenant Lai spoke again, his voice cracking slightly. "I've been reviewing the logs from the Callistria. The last entry. It doesn't make sense. The captain mentions the shimmer, the same phenomenon we saw at Caltris Fifth." Solas turned sharply. "The shimmer?" The captain describes it as a distortion in the air, not an optical illusion, but something that physically altered their surroundings. Like gravity itself was warping. He says it was like a living thing, like something growing. Solas's stomach twisted. The rift at Caltris 5 had been the first sign, the first fracture in the galaxy's reality. And now it was spreading. First, the Callistria. Then, the crew of the Dominion. Now, the entire Xerath Nebula was showing the same signs of a creeping presence, a disturbance that defied understanding. She looked up at the hollow screen that displayed a 3D map of the nebula. The dark tendrils of gas and matter stretched out, like fingers, reaching for the ship, as though the nebula itself was pulling them in. But it wasn't just the nebula that was a threat. It was what lay at the heart of it. "We're entering a dense cluster of spatial anomalies, Icarus," the ship's AI reported, her calm voice somehow adding to the unsettling atmosphere. "I'm detecting multiple gravitational pockets, some of which are fluctuating between negative and positive fields. There are structures within the nebula, but they're Not like anything we've ever seen. Solas gritted her teeth. What kind of structures? Unknown, Icarus replied. The readings are inconsistent, but they appear to be artificial. If they are, they predate any known civilization by millennia. Artificial, predating any known civilization. That sent a shiver down Solas's spine. The Federation had mapped countless systems, discovered ancient ruins, and interacted with alien species for centuries, but never had they encountered something like this. Structures older than the Federation itself, hidden within the cosmic chaos of the Nebula. What kind of race could build such things? And why were they so far from known space? Were they the architects of the anomaly? Or had they too fallen victim to it? Prepare for a close pass through the anomaly field, Solas ordered, her voice sharp. We need to get a visual on those structures. Set course for the center of the anomaly cluster. Lai hesitated, glancing at the display. Admiral, with all due respect, we're pushing the ship to its limits. These gravity wells are not stable. If we go any deeper... I'm aware of the risks, Lieutenant, Solas interrupted, her tone unwavering. But we don't have the luxury of time. We need to understand what we're dealing with, and we need to do it now. The crew fell into an uneasy silence as the Dominion powered forward, its engines straining against the pull of the nebula's chaotic gravity. The ship trembled as it entered the heart of the disturbance, the hull groaning under the stress. Inside, the lights flickered, casting long shadows across the walls. The feeling of unease grew thicker. The air felt wrong. Then, as if on cue, the ship's sensors went haywire. Admiral, look! Lieutenant Lai shouted, pointing toward the viewport. His voice was tight with panic. Solas followed his gaze. There, in the darkness of the nebula, were the structures Icarus had detected. They weren't just buildings. They were monolithic in scale. Towering spires of obsidian black material, rising out of the swirling clouds of gas. Their surfaces were smooth, reflecting no light, absorbing all radiance like black holes in physical form. Some of the spires were intertwined with massive vine-like tendrils that stretched outward, pulsating with a sickly glow. As the ship drifted closer, the spires seemed to come to life. Their jagged forms shifted slightly, almost imperceptibly, like they were aware of their surroundings. The crew stared in stunned silence. There was no sign of life, no movement, no communication. But the eerie, unnatural stillness was enough to send chills down the spine of even the most seasoned officers. We're not alone, Solas whispered under her breath. And then it happened. The shimmer appeared again, a sudden distortion in the air, like a ripple passing through space itself. The ship's systems began to malfunction once more. But this time, it was different. The very fabric of reality seemed to warp, bending, stretching, as though the ship was no longer just in one place. Admiral, we've lost stabilizers, Lai screamed. Before he could finish, the entire command deck was plunged into darkness, and in that darkness, Solas heard the voice again. You do not belong. This time, it wasn't in her mind. It was in the air. It was all around them. The presence, the Watcher, was here, and it was awake. The darkness was suffocating. Solas's hands flew across the control panel, her fingers a blur of motion as she tried desperately to regain control of the Dominion. The ship's systems had failed. Every screen was dark, every display blank, as if the vessel itself had been swallowed by the nebula. Only the distant glow of the monolithic spires outside the viewport illuminated the command deck in an eerie, sickly light. Lieutenant Lai, report! Solas barked, her voice sharp with urgency. Her heart raced, but she refused to let fear take control. They had trained for situations like this. She had faced countless space battles, been in the thick of galactic war zones. But this was something else entirely. Lai's voice crackled from the comms, faint and distorted, like he was speaking through a tunnel. Admiral, I can't access the external sensors. The nebula's gravity. It's affecting everything. The ship lurched violently, sending everyone sprawling across the deck. The gravity flickered again, then cut out completely, leaving the crew floating in weightless disarray. Solas fought to keep her composure, pushing herself off the floor and grasping the nearest console. Icarus, she shouted. I need a status update now. The AI's voice was calm, but there was an underlying tone of something. Something Solas hadn't heard before. A subtle tremor. Admiral, the ship is compromised. All systems are malfunctioning. We are experiencing gravitational distortions that I cannot compensate for. The structures outside, they are interfering with our reality. I cannot determine the exact nature of this interference, but it is affecting our position in space-time. Solas' mind raced. Space-time. The fabric of the universe itself. Was the Dominion slipping through different layers of reality? Was this what had happened to the Callistria, to the crews of the colonies that had vanished into the void? A cold shiver ran down her spine. The monolithic structures outside the ship were no longer just passive observers. They were doing something to the Dominion, warping it. Her first instinct was to retreat, to pull the ship back to the outer rim of the Nebula, but the pull was too strong. The ship seemed to sink deeper into the gravitational vortex, as though the spires themselves were pulling them inward. Admiral, you need to look at this, Lai said urgently, his voice breaking through the chaos. He was speaking from across the deck, his tone strained. The spires, they're changing. Solas turned to face the viewport. The black monoliths were shifting, slowly, deliberately, as if they were coming alive. The tendrils of energy that coiled around them flickered with an unnatural rhythm, pulsing in sync with the ship's failing systems. And then, something even more unsettling happened. The spires began to speak. It wasn't speech in any human sense. There were no words, no sound that could be understood. But somehow, Solas could hear it. Feel it reverberating in her chest, deep in her bones. The frequency seemed to penetrate into her mind, scraping at her consciousness like 1,000 voices, all whispering at once. The thoughts came not through the ears, but directly into her mind, raw and jagged, like 1,000 knives scraping on metal. You do not belong. The words echoed again, not in her ears, but in her soul. The sheer alien nature of it felt like a violation. She could almost see the shimmering outline of something within the nebula, something that had been watching, waiting, an ancient intelligence that existed beyond the stars. Admiral, Lai said again, his voice tinged with desperation. We're being pulled in. We can't break free. The spires, they're emitting some kind of signal. It's overriding our systems. Damn it. Solas slammed her fist against the console, her heart hammering in her chest. Icarus, override the signal, now! But the AI was silent. A glitch, perhaps. Nothing more than a technical fault in the system. But Solas had no time to waste on speculation. She had to act fast, before the ship was dragged deeper into the nebula's heart. She turned to the crew, their faces pale, with fear, as they struggled to regain control of the vessel. But it was no use. Every attempt to stabilize the ship was futile. The nebula's gravity had them locked in its grasp. Solas's mind raced, sifting through every piece of data they had gathered on the nebula, every theory they'd explored. She couldn't remember exactly when it had started, when the galaxy had begun to notice the strange disappearances, the unexplained phenomena. But now, it was clear. The Federation had been blind to what was happening. They had been oblivious to the force lurking just beyond the veil of their understanding. The truth was growing clearer by the second. This nebula, this place, wasn't just a natural anomaly. It wasn't the remnants of a dead star or a rogue black hole. The nebula itself was a sentient entity, a vast, ancient intelligence that had been waiting in the dark for millennia. It had been observing, learning, and now it was ready to make its move. Solas took a deep breath, fighting the panic that threatened to overwhelm her. She was the admiral of the Federation fleet. She couldn't afford to be afraid now. The crew was counting on her. The galaxy itself might be counting on her. Icarus, she said, her voice steady despite the chaos around her. Do you have access to the ship's core systems? The AI's response was almost apologetic. Affirmative, Admiral. I have access to the core, but it is being interfered with. The nebula is blocking our ability to interface with the core directly. Solas thought for a moment, her eyes scanning the endless black void outside. She couldn't wait for a solution to present itself. The Dominion was losing power fast, and the structures were getting closer. She had to make a decision, and she had to make it now. "We're going to have to take the core offline manually," she said. "Prepare the EVA suits. We're going outside." A murmur of shock rippled through the crew. Even Lieutenant Lai looked uncertain. But Solas was resolute. If she couldn't break free from the Nebula's pull using the ship's systems, then she would do what she had to do. She would confront the thing that had brought them here. She would understand what the Spires wanted, and she would end this before it consumed them all. As she strode toward the airlock, she could feel the presence again, the watching. It wasn't just the Nebula. The thing was close now, closer than ever. It was waiting. And Solas would not give it the satisfaction of watching her fall into despair. She would fight back, no matter the cost. The airlock hissed as the chamber opened, releasing the vacuum of space into the suit's sealed interior. Solas stood in the weightless void, her every breath amplified inside the helmet. The EVA suit clung tightly to her body, the specialized armor protecting her from the brutal forces of space, but it couldn't protect her from what waited in the darkness. She glanced back at the Dominion, its massive form drifting perilously close to the massive spires. The ship's hull groaned. Under the strain, its engines sputtering as they tried and failed to break free of the Nebula's oppressive grip. She couldn't wait for the crew to catch up. They had no time. They were beyond that now. The spires loomed before her, towering like silent titans. The darkness of space only made them more ominous, their black surfaces absorbing the light from distant stars and giving nothing back. The closer she got, the more she felt the pulse of something, an energy, a presence that seemed to resonate within her very bones. "It's them," Solas murmured to herself. The Nebula's influence was stronger here, bending reality in ways she could not fully comprehend. But there was no denying what she was feeling. This place was alive. The spires were not just relics of some lost civilization. They were agents of something far older, far more powerful. And whatever it was, it had been waiting for them, waiting for her. As she floated toward the nearest spire, the air around her began to shimmer again. Flickers of light and shadow twisting unnaturally. The same distortion that had plagued the ship's systems now surrounded her. And for a brief moment, Solas felt herself displaced. She could see the Dominion. And yet at the same time, it was as if she was standing in another place. Another time. The spires seemed to stretch in impossible directions, reaching into multiple planes of existence. Solas fought against the dizziness, focusing on the task at hand. There was no time for wonder, no time for questions. She had to sever the Nebula's hold on her ship, and she had to do it now. She wasn't sure how, but she felt that the core of this mystery, the answer, was right here, within reach. The spire in front of her pulsed with energy. A ripple passed through the air, and Solas's vision blurred momentarily. She could see something moving within the structure. A shape, a presence. It wasn't quite physical, yet it was. It existed on some level beyond the tangible. She couldn't make it out clearly, but the shape was unmistakable. It was watching her. And then it spoke. Not in words, but in thoughts, directly into her mind. It was the same voice she had heard on the ship, that cold, alien presence that had sent shivers through her soul. "Why do you seek to destroy what you cannot understand?" The voice was soft, but its weight pressed down on her like an invisible force. It wasn't a threat, it was an invitation to join it in the infinite silence of the Nebula. "I'm not here to destroy anything," Solas replied, her voice resolute despite the cold terror clawing at her insides. "I'm here to stop you." The structure before her shifted again, this time in a more pronounced way. The spire cracked open, its surface bending like molten rock, revealing something hidden within. At first, Solas thought it was a figure, but as the dark veil peeled away, she realized that it wasn't a being. It was a vessel, or rather, what remained of one. A ship, no, a part of a ship, seated at the heart of the spire. Its exterior was fused with the spire's black stone, its once sleek hull now a jagged organic mass. This was no Federation craft. This was something far older. The thing that had once commanded this ship was long gone, but remnants of its power still lingered. It was alive. The ship and the nebula bound together, their essences intertwined. Solas's mind reeled. This was the source of the anomaly. This was what had been calling them here. The nebula wasn't just a cosmic phenomenon. It was a prison for an ancient, otherworldly intelligence. And the spires were its jailers, its keepers. The ship had crashed here, stranded in a dying galaxy, its consciousness trapped in this dark corner of the universe. But something had gone wrong. The creature, the intelligence, hadn't died. It had adapted. It had been waiting for the right moment to break free. The voice returned, cold and distant. You cannot undo what has already begun. The barrier between your reality and mine is weakening. You will all be consumed. Solas's heart skipped a beat. The ship, the nebula, it was more than just a place. It was a conduit, a bridge between realms, and the nebula wasn't just a byproduct of some cosmic event. It was the product of an ancient intelligence, an ancient force that had once controlled entire galaxies, but had been lost to time. Now it was awakening, pulling everything around it into its grasp. I'm not going to let that happen, Solas said, her voice sharp. She reached to her waist, drawing a small but powerful device from her belt. It was a last resort measure, a tool developed by the Federation's top engineers, a quantum destabilizer. It wasn't designed to destroy the nebula, but it could disrupt the energy field around the spire, severing its connection to the ship and, hopefully, the nebula itself. With trembling hands, Solas activated the device. The world around her rippled as energy surged through the air, distorting space-time once more. The spires screamed in silence, the very fabric of the nebula shaking as reality itself seemed to bend and crack. For a brief moment, Solas felt the overwhelming sensation of being everywhere. The spires, the Dominion, the nebula, caught in a web of space and time that she couldn't escape. And then, just as quickly, the pressure vanished. The nebula's hold on the Dominion loosened. The gravitational anomalies began to fade, and the distorted energy surrounding the ship subsided. The Dominion was free. The voice in her mind, the presence that had haunted her for what felt like an eternity, fell silent. Solas didn't move, for a long moment. She was weightless in the vacuum of space, surrounded by the remnants of a forgotten civilization. The ship's systems slowly flickered back to life, and she could see the Dominion drifting away from the nebula, its hull intact, but scarred. She had done it. She had saved her crew. The nebula's grip was gone, but there was still one question that lingered, unspoken. What had she set loose? As the Dominion moved away from the nebula, Solas couldn't shake the feeling that the intelligence, whatever it was, wasn't gone. It had simply retreated. Its slumber was not permanent. It would return, and when it did, it would come with a vengeance. The universe was far more dangerous than anyone realized. That concludes the story. Thank you for following this journey to the edge of the galaxy. If you enjoyed this, don't forget to leave a like, share your thoughts in the comments, and let us know what you think happened next. The battle isn't over. There's always more waiting in the stars.